You wake up in the morning and there's a version of you that makes a quiet promise to finally get organized, to answer those emails, to start the project that's been sitting in the back of your mind for months. And for the first hour, it feels real. You are that person. Then something shifts. Maybe it's a notification. Maybe it's a single comment from someone that lands in your chest the wrong way. Or maybe it's nothing at all. You just look at the same to-do list and it suddenly feels like it belongs to a stranger. The energy is gone, the clarity is gone, and you're left wondering which one is the real you. This isn't about mood swings in the obvious sense. You're not talking about being happy one moment and sad the next. This is deeper. It's the sensation that the very structure of who you are seems to dissolve and reconfigure depending on the context you're in. Around one friend, you're sharp and articulate. Around another, you're quiet, almost invisible. In a work setting, you're competent and reliable. Alone on a Sunday afternoon, you're indecisive and heavy, unsure of what you even want. You start to feel like you're collecting versions of yourself, and none of them feel like the definitive one. You wonder if there's a core somewhere that's stable, or if you're just a bundle of responses shaped by whoever is in the room, whatever task is in front of you, whatever version of yourself you happen to wake up with. There's a particular exhaustion that comes with this. Not just the exhaustion of inconsistency, but the exhaustion of constantly trying to locate yourself. You'll catch yourself thinking, which one am I today? And because the answer keeps changing, you start to mistrust your own instincts. You second-guess decisions you made yesterday because they don't feel like decisions you would make today. You hesitate to commit to things because you don't know which version of you will show up when the time comes. This is where the quiet shame creeps in. You tell yourself you lack character, you lack discipline. You tell yourself that other people seem to have a steady thread running through their lives, a consistent sense of self that carries them through different environments. And you begin to believe that your fluidity is a sign of weakness, something to hide, something to fix by trying harder to be one person. But what if the problem isn't that you change? What if the problem is that you've been measuring yourself against a model of identity that was never designed to hold you? There's a reason this feels so disorienting, and it's not because you're broken. It's because your brain is wired to construct the self moment by moment, not to maintain a fixed statue. The idea that we have one stable, unchanging identity is a cultural myth, not a neuroscientific fact. What you're experiencing is the gap between that myth and the reality of how the human mind actually operates.
Let's look at what's happening beneath the surface. The brain is not a storage unit for a single self. It's a prediction engine. Every moment, it's taking in sensory data, comparing it to past experiences, and constructing a version of reality that helps you navigate whatever's in front of you. And part of that construction is the sense of self. Your brain doesn't have a single you file that it pulls up every morning. Instead, it activates different networks depending on the context. There's a concept in cognitive science called the context-dependent self. It means that your brain encodes memories, habits, and even personality traits in relation to the environment where they were formed. When you return to that environment, those patterns activate. This is why you might feel like a completely different person when you visit your childhood home. It's not an act. It's your brain literally reactivating the neural pathways that were dominant during that period of your life. So the reason you feel like a different person around different people is that each relationship has its own history, its own emotional tone, its own set of expectations. And your brain, being the efficient organ that it is, automatically shifts into the version of you that was most adaptive in that context. It's not a sign of inauthenticity. It's a sign that your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do, adapt to its environment to keep you safe and connected. The problem arises when you don't have a way to hold all these versions together. When you don't understand the mechanism, you end up feeling fragmented. You mistake your adaptability for a lack of identity, and that's where the real suffering begins. Let's use a metaphor. Imagine you're standing in front of a large mirror that's been shattered into many pieces. Each piece reflects a different angle of the room, a different light source, a different part of your face. If you look at one piece, you see one version. If you look at another, you see something different. And if you spend your life running from piece to piece, trying to find the one that shows the real you, you'll exhaust yourself. But the mirror itself hasn't disappeared. It's just that your attention has been scattered. The shift happens when you stop trying to find the one true piece and instead step back to see the whole mirror. You are not any single version of yourself. You are the space that holds all the versions. This isn't just poetic language. There's a psychological framework that supports this. It's called self-complexity theory. The idea is that people with a more complex sense of self, meaning they have multiple distinct yet integrated aspects of identity, tend to be more resilient. When one part of you struggles, it doesn't collapse the entire system. The goal isn't to eliminate the different versions of you. The goal is to build a relationship between them, so you stop feeling like a stranger to yourself.
So how do you actually do that? How do you move from fragmentation to integration without forcing yourself into a false sense of stability? The first step is to stop trying to catch yourself being consistent. Instead, you start mapping the contexts. For 1 week, you simply observe without judgment. You notice, when do I feel most clear? When do I feel most anxious? Who brings out the version of me that I like? Who brings out the version I don't recognize? What environments make me feel grounded? What environments make me feel scattered? You're not trying to change anything yet. You're just collecting data. This works because of a process in the brain called reappraisal. When you name an experience, you activate the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for perspective taking and regulation. The simple act of observing your shifts without judgment reduces the amygdala's threat response. In other words, you stop feeling like something is wrong with you because you're no longer treating your changes as a danger. You're treating them as information. Let's say you notice that every time you're around a certain colleague, you become quiet and deferential. Instead of judging yourself as weak or inauthentic, you simply note, in this context, my brain is activating a pattern of self-protection. That's not a flaw, that's a strategy your brain learned somewhere. The question isn't whether the strategy is good or bad, the question is whether it's still serving you. The second step is to create what psychologists call bridging narratives. This means you consciously weave a story that connects your different versions instead of treating them as contradictions. You stop saying, I was so confident yesterday and today I'm a mess. Which one is real? And you start saying, I am someone who can be confident in environments where I feel prepared. And I am someone who can feel overwhelmed when the context is unfamiliar. Both are true. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's about increasing your accuracy. The brain craves coherence. When you have a story that holds your complexity, you stop fighting yourself. The energy you are spending on self-criticism becomes available for actual choice. For example, if you know that you tend to lose your sense of direction when you're tired, you stop expecting yourself to make important decisions at 10 p.m. If you know that you become more introverted in large groups, you stop forcing yourself to perform extroversion. You're not shrinking, you're learning to honor the conditions under which different parts of you thrive. The third step is to practice intentional context selection. This is where you move from being a passive recipient of your environment to an active architect of it. Your brain is always responding to cues. The people you follow on social media, the lighting in your room, the time of day you attempt certain tasks. All of these are contexts that activate different versions of you. Once you've mapped your patterns, you can start arranging your life so that the versions you value have more room to emerge. If you know you feel most like yourself in the morning, you protect that time. If you know a particular conversation always leaves you feeling fragmented, you either set boundaries around it or you prepare yourself beforehand. This isn't about controlling everything. It's about recognizing that your sense of self is shaped by context, and you have more agency over your context than you think. The fourth step is to develop what's called a stable internal reference. This is a practice, not a destination. You choose one or two constants that remain the same regardless of context, and you anchor yourself to them. It could be a 10-minute walk every morning where you don't consume any media. It could be a question you ask yourself every day, like, what do I actually need right now? It could be a physical practice, like putting your hand on your chest and taking 3 breaths before walking into a new environment. This works because of the brain's capacity for pattern completion. When you consistently pair a specific action with a state of groundedness, that action becomes a trigger for the parasympathetic nervous system. Over time, you can use it to stabilize yourself across contexts. You're not trying to become the same person everywhere. You're creating a home base that you can return to no matter where you are. The 5th step is to let go of the fantasy of a permanent self. This is the hardest one because it's been sold to us as the measure of a life well lived. But the most psychologically healthy people are not the ones who never change. They are the ones who have a flexible sense of self that can expand to meet new experiences without falling apart. They are not confused by their own contradictions because they've stopped expecting themselves to be a single note in a world that asks for a symphony. Think of it this way. A river is not confused by the fact that it moves faster in some places and slower in others. It doesn't wonder if the part of it that reflects the sky is more real than the part that carves through stone. It simply continues. It adapts to the terrain without losing its fundamental nature. And its nature is not stillness. Its nature is flow. You are not a fixed point. You are a process, and the confusion you've been feeling is not a sign that you're failing at being a person. It's a sign that you've outgrown a rigid definition of what a person should be. You are not multiple personalities fighting for control. You are a single consciousness that expresses itself differently across different conditions. That is not fragmentation. That is complexity. And complexity is not weakness. It is the hallmark of a system that can learn, adapt, and grow.
The real work is not to find the one true version of yourself. The real work is to build a relationship with all of them, to listen to what each one is trying to protect or express, to stop treating your shifts as betrayals and start treating them as signals, to recognize that the part of you that wants structure and the part of you that resists structure are both trying to help you survive. They're just using different strategies. And when you stop fighting yourself, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel a continuity that has nothing to do with consistency. It's a continuity of attention. You're no longer scattered across different versions. You're present, watching them move. And in that presence, you find a steadiness that doesn't require you to be one thing. It only requires you to be here. So the next time you feel yourself shifting, don't ask, which one am I? Ask instead, what does this version of me need? And see what happens when you meet that need without shame. You might find that the person you've been searching for was never waiting at the end of some quest for stability. They were always the one asking the question.